Every Sunday, Eleanor James woke up before the sun had time to stretch. At 72, her bones ached in the morning, but her spirit didn't. She liked the quiet before the world stirred, the hum of her kettle, the soft clink of her favorite teacup. She always drank Earl Grey, no sugar, just a splash of milk. Her son had offered to buy her fancy teas once, but she told him, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. After tea, she'd press her lavender church dress with the iron she'd had since the 80s. It was simple, but elegant. The kind of dress people remembered. Her flats were neatly polished the night before, set by the front door like old friends waiting. At 9:30 a.m., Eleanor stepped outside into the cool Georgia morning. The wind chimes on her porch sang a few notes as she locked the door and tucked the brass key into her purse. She didn't drive. Never needed to. Church was just 2 blocks away. New Hope Baptist. Her sanctuary. The pastor always greeted her first. Miss Eleanor, looking sharp as ever. She always replied, and you're still preaching long as ever. After service, she liked to take her time walking home. She stopped by the flower shop to admire the tulips, then passed the bulletin board at the community center. She liked to see what was new, even if most flyers had been there for months. Her final stop was always Price Saver Market. It wasn't much. Flickering lights, sticky floors, but it had the basics. Today, she needed bread, milk, and a few apples. Inside, she moved slowly but deliberately. She examined each apple, holding them like small treasures. At the register, she greeted the young cashier with a warm smile. The girl barely looked up. Eleanor opened her old wallet and counted her coins carefully. She'd always liked paying with change. Said it kept her mind sharp. The cashier sighed loud enough for her to hear. Eleanor didn't react. She just kept counting. As she placed her receipt into her purse, she noticed the girl pick up the store phone. She turned her back, but Eleanor could hear. Yeah, I don't know. She's just acting weird. Kinda slow. Like. I think she's trying something. Eleanor froze. She didn't look strange. She looked like someone's grandmother. Someone who worked hard her whole life. Someone who gave more than she ever asked for. Still, her stomach turned when she heard the word weird. By the time she stepped outside, a patrol car was already pulling up to the curb. Then another. 2 officers stepped out. One adjusted his belt. The other pulled his sunglasses down and scanned her like she was a threat. Eleanor clutched her purse and stood tall. It was just another Sunday, but this one was about to change everything. Eleanor James stood still on the sidewalk outside Price Saver, her paper bag pressed against her chest like a shield. The late morning sun was warm, but the chill that slid down her spine had nothing to do with the weather. 2 officers approached. Fast. Firm. No greeting. No smile. The taller one, with buzzed blonde hair and sunglasses too dark to see through, stopped just inches from her. His name tag read Carter. The other, shorter, broader, with a smirk that never quite left his face, trailed just behind. Officer Mason. He cracked his knuckles like he had something to prove. Carter spoke first. Ma'am, we got a report about suspicious behavior. We need to ask you a few questions. Eleanor blinked. Suspicious? Her voice was soft, calm. I bought groceries. That's all. Carter didn't even glance at the receipt she still held. Mind if we look in your bag? Yes, she said, steady but firm. I do mind. I paid for everything. You can ask the cashier. Mason scoffed. She's the one who called us. Eleanor's fingers tightened on her purse. Why? Because I took too long? Because I'm old? Or because I'm black? That smirk on Mason's face? It disappeared. Carter stepped forward, lowering his sunglasses just enough to meet her eyes. There was no kindness in his stare. Ma'am, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Eleanor's voice didn't shake. Not yet. Don't make what harder? I've done nothing wrong. Mason reached for her arm. She stepped back, slow but deliberate. You do not touch me, she said. That was when everything shifted. Mason's tone turned sharp. You're resisting. I am not, Eleanor replied, still calm. I'm standing my ground. Carter stepped beside her now, flanking her like she was a cornered animal. This is your last chance. The street had grown quieter. A few people had stopped, watched, but no one said anything. Not yet. Eleanor took a breath. She wasn't a loud woman. She never raised her voice in church, not even during the fiery sermons. But there, in the heat of disrespect, something rose in her chest. I am a retired nurse, a mother, a churchgoer, and you're treating me like a criminal because I have gray hair and brown skin. Mason looked ready to grab her. That's when it happened. A black SUV screeched to a stop by the curb. The back door flew open, and out stepped a tall, sharply dressed black man in a tailored navy blue suit. His presence demanded silence. His eyes locked on the officers. "Get your hands off my mother." Eleanor blinked, surprised, but only for a moment. Because that voice, that fire, it could only belong to one person. Her son, Malik James. For a moment, the world stood still. Even the wind seemed to pause as Malik James stepped between his mother and the two officers. His face was unreadable, calm, composed, but his eyes burned with something cold and sharp. Mason's mouth dropped slightly. Carter tensed, straightened. His hand hovered near his holster, unsure. Eleanor looked up at her son. Her relief was quiet, but unmistakable. "Malik," she whispered. "You got here fast." He gave her a slight nod. "I still fixed on the officers. I had a bad feeling when you didn't answer your phone." Mason tried to recover his authority. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." Malik turned to him slowly. "It concerns me when two armed men are harassing my 72-year-old mother over groceries." Carter stepped in, his voice tight. She was acting suspicious. Moving slow. Seemed confused. Malik tilted his head. "Suspicious? For being elderly? Or for being black?" Carter's jaw twitched. "We got a call from the cashier. We're just following up." "And did you review the security footage? Speak to witnesses? Or just show up ready to accuse someone who looks like your idea of a problem?" Mason's voice grew defensive. "Are you a lawyer or something?" Malik reached into his inside jacket pocket, pulled out a slim leather wallet, and flipped it open. "State bar ID." The seal shone in the light. "Actually, yes. Civil rights attorney. Malik James. You might have heard of my firm. We've taken a few cases against this department already." Carter said nothing. But Mason? Mason stared. Hard. Something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition. Eleanor noticed it too. She narrowed her gaze. "You know him, don't you?" Malik didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Mason. "Yeah. We went to high school together." Now Carter looked at his partner. "Seriously," Malik continued. His tone was calm, but icy. "You used to call me Midnight in the hallway. Remember that, Mason? You and your little crew called me Lawboy when I joined debate. Said I'd never make it out of that neighborhood." Mason looked away. His jaw clenched. Funny how things turn out. Silence settled again. Tighter this time. Malik stepped closer, pulling out his phone. "You're being recorded. My mother was profiled, publicly humiliated, and your body cams, if they're on, will back that up. If they're not, well, that's another lawsuit." Eleanor reached out and touched his arm gently. "Let's just go, baby." He looked at her and nodded once. Then back at the officers. "You'll be hearing from us." Malik guided Eleanor to the SUV, opened the door for her like a gentleman, and helped her in. Carter muttered something under his breath. Mason stood frozen, humiliated. As the SUV pulled away, Malik didn't even glance back. But Mason? He was still standing there, face pale, hand twitching, haunted by the man he used to bully. And the man that man had become. The hum of the road filled the SUV, but inside, the silence between Eleanor and Malik was thick. Not angry, just full. Full of unspoken pain. Full of memories. Eleanor looked over at her son as he drove, his jaw tight, hands steady on the wheel. Her voice came soft. "You didn't tell me you went to school with that officer." Malik gave a faint smile, bitter at the edges. "Didn't think it mattered anymore." She waited, then added, "But it does now." He nodded, eyes fixed on the road. His name was Travis Mason. Back then, he ruled the school. Football captain. The kind of kid teachers let get away with anything. Eleanor sighed, her voice low. "And you?" "I was the kid with glasses who read legal dictionaries for fun. The one who corrected history teachers and sat in the library at lunch." Eleanor chuckled quietly. "You always were different." Different didn't mean safe, though. Not at Westfield High. He paused, jaw tightening again. He and his friends used to trip me in the hallway. Call me names. Midnight, Abomination, Boy Wonder, but not in a nice way. One time they shoved me into a locker and told me I'd end up a janitor like my uncle. Eleanor's face darkened. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Malik exhaled slowly. "You were already working 2 jobs. Taking care of Grandma. I didn't want to add more weight to your shoulders." Her hand reached across and rested gently on his arm. "Baby, it wouldn't have been weight. It would have been love." They rode in silence for a moment, her words sitting heavy but warm between them. Malik finally spoke again, softer now. "I never forgot him. Never forgot how small he made me feel. And now," Eleanor asked. Now he had to watch me walk up in a suit. Watch me defend the woman who raised me right. The woman he tried to humiliate. Eleanor smiled gently. You handled it with class. Just like I raised you. He glanced at her, his face softening. But it still hurt, he admitted. Seeing him in that uniform. Still carrying that same smirk. Still holding power. Eleanor looked out the window at the passing streets of their old neighborhood. That's why your work matters, Malik. That's why you do what you do. He nodded. I know. But sometimes it feels like it's never enough. She squeezed his hand before he could pull away. You were enough before the degree. Before the courtroom. You're more than enough now. They pulled up in front of her house. Malik parked, but didn't get out yet. He stared ahead. I think I'm going to file something official. Not just a complaint. I want to make a case. Eleanor met his gaze. Then do it. Not just for me. She paused. For the kid you were. And for the kids coming up behind you. The next morning, Malik sat at his kitchen table, a cup of coffee cooling in front of him, though he didn't touch it. His phone had buzzed twice, but he ignored it. His mind was still replaying the scene from yesterday, the sound of Mason's voice, the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He hadn't expected that. But what really gnawed at him was the moment he saw the name Mason again. The name that haunted his high school years like a shadow that never quite left. The past had resurfaced in a way he hadn't been prepared for. As he stared at his laptop, drafting the legal documents he would need, the doorbell rang. He paused, confused. It was too early for a client meeting. Opening the door, he was met by none other than Travis Mason himself. The officer stood there, wearing a uniform, but there was an unfamiliar unease in his posture. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, his face tense. Malik didn't move at first. He simply stared, the surprise more evident in his eyes than his voice. What do you want? Mason cleared his throat, his eyes darting away before meeting Malik's gaze again. I came to apologize. Malik's brow furrowed. He folded his arms. You came to apologize? After everything. Mason shifted on his feet. He looked uncomfortable. It wasn't the same cocky arrogance Malik had remembered. I know this is a lot. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I came here to say that what I did in high school was wrong. And I was an idiot. Malik's heart pounded in his chest, but he stayed still, unmoving. Why now? Malik asked, his voice even but sharp. Why come to me now? After all these years? Mason opened his mouth to speak, then closed it, as though the words wouldn't come. Finally, he sighed. Because what I saw yesterday, seeing you stand up for your mother, it made me realize how much I've wasted. I don't know what's worse, what I did to you back then, or what I've become now. Malik stared at him, his mind racing. This wasn't the apology he had imagined. In fact, it was far from it. You think an apology changes anything? Malik's voice grew colder. You think you can just walk into my life and undo the years of hate? Mason seemed to shrink under Malik's gaze. I'm not asking for that. But maybe I can help fix things now. I've been thinking a lot, and I want to do better. Malik took a step back, shaking his head. You think you can undo a lifetime of hurt with words? Mason's eyes met his again, something raw and unspoken between them. I don't know, he said quietly. But I need to try. For you. For your mom. Malik let out a frustrated sigh, running a hand through his hair. I don't need you to try, Mason. I need you to understand. The words hung in the air. And for a brief moment, the animosity between them softened. But only for a moment. I'm done here, Malik said, turning toward the door. If you really want to make up for the past, do it with your actions, not your words. As the door closed behind him, Malik's hand clenched into a fist. Was it enough? Could it ever be enough? The next few days felt like a blur to Malik. He buried himself in paperwork, his office cluttered with legal files, his mind focused on one thing, justice for his mother. The weight of it all was heavy, but this time, it was a different kind of weight. It wasn't just about the confrontation at the store anymore. It was about what the officers had represented. The years of unjust treatment, the racial profiling, the quiet, simmering anger of being made to feel less than simply because of the color of your skin. By the time Malik walked into his office the following Monday, he had a plan. He was going to take the fight all the way. The city's police department wouldn't just apologize and sweep this under the rug. They would pay. He set up a meeting with Sarah Collins, an experienced civil rights attorney and his trusted mentor. She had been the one to push him toward a career in law when he was just a kid, when he'd told her he wanted to change the system from the inside. Now, he needed her more than ever. They met at his office, a small but well-kept space with bookshelves stacked high and a lone window overlooking the street. Malik's fingers drummed nervously on the desk as Sarah sat across from him, her eyes sharp, analytical. "So, what's your plan, Malik?" she asked, already knowing the answer. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "I want to file a federal civil rights lawsuit. I want to go after the department. Carter and Mason specifically." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You know that's not going to be easy. They'll fight back. They always do. You're dealing with power, Malik." Malik didn't flinch. "I know. But they crossed a line with my mother. I'm not going to let this go. Not this time." Sarah looked at him, her eyes softening. "I can't say I blame you. But you have to be prepared for everything they'll throw at you." He nodded, determination in his eyes. "I'm ready." Back at home, Eleanor had spent the last few days pacing between the living room and the kitchen. Every time she thought about what had happened, she felt a swirl of emotions, anger, disbelief, but mostly fear. She had raised Malik to be strong, but seeing him go up against the police felt different now. It felt personal. The knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Malik stood there, a briefcase in his hand, his eyes unreadable. "I'm going to make this right, Ma," he said quietly. "It's happening." She stepped aside, letting him in. "You're going to fight them? The whole department?" "Yes. We'll fight them with everything we've got." Eleanor didn't know what to say. She just pulled him into a tight hug, the kind that mothers give when words aren't enough. "I'm proud of you, baby. No matter what happens." Malik's eyes burned as he held her close. "This isn't just for us, Ma. This is for everyone who's ever been treated like we were. For everyone who's been scared to speak up." It was the beginning of something bigger than he'd ever imagined. A battle for justice, for equality, and for the future of his mother and everyone like her. The courtroom was heavy with tension. Malik sat at the front, his back straight, eyes scanning the faces of the jury. He wasn't used to being on the other side of the courtroom, but the fire burning in him kept him steady. Today wasn't just about his mother. It wasn't even just about Mason and Carter. This was about every black person who had ever felt the weight of injustice pressed down on them. He glanced at his mother, sitting behind him. Eleanor's presence was quiet, but it was like a steadying force. She gave him a soft smile, as if telling him that no matter what happened, they were in this together. That smile gave him strength. The defense table, across from him, was occupied by two attorneys in expensive suits. One of them, a young man with slicked back hair, shot Malik a glance, his expression unreadable. The other, a middle-aged woman with a sharp demeanor, kept flipping through her notes as if trying to memorize every word. Malik's eyes narrowed. They were preparing for war, but they weren't prepared for him. The judge, a middle-aged woman with gray hair, tapped her gavel, signaling the start of the session. "We will begin with the plaintiff's opening statement." Malik stood up, his body poised. He adjusted his tie as he walked to the front, his voice clear and confident as he addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I stand before you today not only as a lawyer but as a son who loves his mother. I stand before you today to seek justice for her, and for every person who has been treated as less than human simply because of the color of their skin." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "What happened to my mother, Eleanor James, on the day of this incident is a direct result of a larger problem we have in this country. The problem is racial profiling. It's the problem of officers like Carter and Mason, who decided that because my mother was an elderly black woman carrying a grocery bag, she was somehow suspicious. That's what they told her. And when she stood up for herself, they tried to intimidate her, tried to shame her." He took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving the jury. "But it wasn't just about groceries, and it wasn't just about a confrontation in the street. This case is about what my mother faced simply because of who she is. We are not criminals. We are human beings deserving of respect." He turned, locking eyes with Carter and Mason, still seated at the defense table, their faces now tight with discomfort. These officers don't get to decide who is suspicious based on their own biases. They don't get to treat people like my mother this way. Not in my country. Not in my city. The courtroom was silent for a moment. Malik could feel the intensity building. This was the moment, the one where he had to lay it all out and make them see the truth. He looked back at his mother, who was watching him intently. She nodded, her expression full of quiet pride. It wasn't just the law that Malik had inherited from her. It was the courage to stand tall when the world tried to break you. Malik turned back to the jury. "We're here today because we can't allow this behavior to continue. No one else should have to go through what my mother went through. And it starts right here, right now. It starts with us. The room was still. He let his words hang in the air, hoping they would resonate. The defense attorney's voice broke the silence. Objection, Your Honor. This is more of an emotional appeal than a legal argument. The judge raised her hand, silencing the room. Sustained. Please stick to the facts, Mr. James. Malik nodded, but inside, the fire only grew. The facts were on his side. The truth was undeniable. The facts are this. My mother was harassed, humiliated, and treated like a criminal without cause. And we're here to ensure that this kind of treatment never happens again. He sat down, the tension still hanging in the air. The battle had just begun. The trial had been going on for weeks, the tension building with each passing day. The defense was pulling out every trick in the book, questioning Malik's credibility, trying to discredit his mother's testimony, even insinuating that her memory of the events had been distorted. But Malik never wavered. Every day he entered that courtroom, it felt like a battle, each word, each piece of evidence, a step closer to the justice his mother deserved. The more he fought, the more he saw the cracks in the defense's case. But there was one moment, a single moment, that shifted everything. The moment that could change the outcome of the entire trial. It happened late one afternoon. Malik was wrapping up his cross-examination of Officer Carter. The officer had been tense under the spotlight, his testimony growing more and more defensive. Malik could feel the cracks. It was time to push. Officer Carter, Malik began, his voice calm but firm. You said earlier that you approached my mother because she looked suspicious, correct? Carter shifted in his seat, looking at Malik with disdain. Yes. She was standing in a place that was known for drug activity, carrying a bag. Malik nodded slowly, leaning forward. And how did you determine she was suspicious? Because she was black? Or because she was elderly? The courtroom was still. Carter opened his mouth, but no words came out. His lips twitched in frustration as he tried to maintain control. You can't honestly tell this jury that your decision to approach her wasn't influenced by her appearance. The simple fact that she was a black woman in a neighborhood you had already decided was high risk, that wasn't just a coincidence, was it? Carter's jaw tightened. That's not what I meant. Malik cut him off, pressing forward with an intensity that rattled the room. What you meant was that you assumed she was guilty of something based on her race. You assumed she didn't belong. And that's not just wrong, it's unlawful. Malik's words hung in the air, the accusation heavy and undeniable. He could feel the weight of the jury's gaze shift as they took in what he was saying. He wasn't just attacking the officer, he was attacking the system that allowed this behavior to thrive. But the turning point came when Malik revealed something unexpected. Officer Carter, Malik said, his voice calm but dripping with purpose, you don't know this, but I've seen you before. A long time ago. You might not remember me. I was just a kid back then, middle school. But I remember you. You were the one who stood by and let your friend, Travis Mason, call me names. You let him and his friends push me around. Do you remember that? Carter froze. For a moment, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. His face turned pale. Malik's words hit like a thunderclap, shaking everything to its core. You never thought I'd be standing here in front of you, did you? You never thought I'd be the one to stand up for my mother. For all the people who look like us. But here I am. The officer's eyes flickered with panic, but Malik didn't let up. It wasn't just my mother you tried to break yesterday. It was all the years of oppression. You're not just accountable for what you did to her. You're accountable for everything that led up to this moment. The silence in the room was deafening. Malik returned to his seat, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't just exposed the officer's bias. He had exposed the system itself, the twisted legacy of racism that perpetuated fear and hatred for generations. It was a moment of clarity, a moment where everything shifted. For the first time, the defense seemed rattled. Carter's once confident posture sagged, his eyes flickering nervously. Malik knew, deep down, that this was it. This was the turning point, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. The trial had reached its climax. After weeks of legal maneuvering, testimonies, and endless hours of preparation, the moment of reckoning had arrived. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the jury deliberated. Malik sat at his table, his fingers gripping the edge, a storm of emotions swirling inside him. His mother sat beside him, her eyes fixed ahead, but Malik could sense her quiet strength. The air was thick with tension. They had done everything they could. The defense had tried everything to deflect, to undermine the case. But Malik had struck the decisive blows, his mother's testimony, the revelation about Officer Carter, and the unwavering determination to stand up for what was right. It felt like it was out of his hands now, but at the same time, it felt like the end of a long, grueling journey. And then, the door to the jury room opened. The judge stood, her voice calm but commanding as she called for silence. The jury has reached a verdict. Malik's heart raced. His mother squeezed his hand, her grip a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He didn't want to look at her, not now. He kept his eyes on the jury as they filed in, each person's face a mask of neutrality. They sat, and the foreman stood up, a thick silence stretching between them and the rest of the room. We, the jury, find the defendants, Officers Mason and Carter, guilty of racial discrimination, unlawful detention, and violation of civil rights in the case of Eleanor James. Malik's breath caught in his chest. The words rang in his ears, echoing through the courtroom. He couldn't believe it. They had won. The justice they had been fighting for, the justice his mother deserved, had been delivered. For a moment, the room was still. The weight of the verdict settled over everyone. Even the defense attorneys seemed momentarily stunned, their faces pale as the implications sank in. Officer Carter's eyes were wide, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. The judge spoke again, her voice steady. Sentencing will occur at a later date, but the jury's verdict is clear. Malik's hands trembled as he stood, his mother rising beside him. They hadn't just won a lawsuit. They had won a battle against a system that had too long allowed this kind of abuse to go unchecked. The world had just shifted, and for the first time in his life, Malik felt like he was on the right side of history. As they walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the moment finally hit. Eleanor wrapped her arm around Malik's shoulders, pulling him into a tight embrace. Her voice was low, but full of pride. "You did it, baby. You really did it." Malik held her close, his throat tight with emotion. "We did it, Ma. We did it together." For a moment, the world seemed to fall away. It wasn't about the case anymore. It wasn't about the officers, or the law, or the fight. It was about something deeper. It was about change, about standing up in the face of injustice, about making a difference. And in that moment, Malik knew that this was just the beginning. This victory was the spark that would ignite the fire of change. They had made history, but there was so much more to do. He wasn't going to stop now. He wasn't going to stop until everyone, everywhere, could feel the same freedom they felt today.